Hi everybody, Dr. Newmark here. This is your week 8 highlights video, and the video does have a little bit of a different look. There's not a slideshow this week like there has been for the last several weeks, but this week is the midpoint of our semester. At the end of this week, you turn in your second major project, which is basically your usability report template project. So I'll be excited to see how those turned out after a round of peer review. So for this week, you did have a chapter to read, and it was a chapter from the Rubin Handbook of Usability Testing. It's the last chapter in the book. And one thing that I just wanted to point out in a quick discussion of this chapter is that while this chapter may seem to indicate strategies for basically being a PR agent for the incorporation of usability testing into an organization and might seem to you to only pertain to larger organizations that manufacture things or are engineering firms, I'm sure that there are ways that you can think about doing small-scale incorporations of usability testing in any organization. If you work in a cafe, if you work in a library, if you work in a medical laboratory, in all of these places, as Rubin and Chisnell suggest, there are opportunities to usability test something or user test something in the life cycle process, even if it's just a piece of documentation. They suggest that documentation is actually a great entry point. They mention instructions manuals or quick how to set up certain things. Testing those for better efficiency and efficacy and user attunement are things that we could all do. For example, in my history, I worked at a French bakery here in Albuquerque in high school and in the summers when I was in college. There were lots of processes that we needed to follow to complete our tasks, right? To set up the store, to open it, to close it down, to do all of the accounting with the register each day. And then back in the bakery section, there were certainly recipes that were followed and processes that were well worn over time that needed to be airtight because the audience, our users, which were our customers, they expected replicated results, right? A cookie to taste a certain way. And so indeed, there might have been circumstances where a process didn't work the way it was supposed to. Maybe the documentation, even if you think of that as a menu or signage that reveals what sandwiches we're serving on a certain day, that could be redesigned to be more attuned to the actual needs of the user. Is the font too small? Is the chalk on the chalkboard not legible? There are lots of small scale kinds of usability testing you can do in any workplace. And other times in my life, I've worked in engineering communication, which is a more technical field, right? And as a university administrator, as the coordinator for technical and professional communication at UNM, I have to create various kinds of documentation and public-facing content often, even at the level of creating a flyer, like about our technical and professional communication minor and certificate. So when I create those flyers, it might behoove me, since this is an organization of one, often to test that on actual students who are enrolled in our minor and our major. Is this comprehensible? Is the way that the minor is articulated in the university catalog somehow more usable to you, more comprehensible to you than the way that I articulate it in our materials created within our program? So I just want to sort of tighten the lens on what Rubin and Chisnell are saying in chapter 14 about how to start up a usability testing scheme in an organization to something a little bit smaller. As I said, I gave you some examples from my own life about things in my day-to-day work life that I could have tested to ensure that they were more attuned to the actual needs of my audience. Of course, I had to know the audience in order to do that. Audience and purpose are the foundational watchwords of this field of technical and professional communication. So on that note, that's a brief summary of this chapter. I hope that the chapter that you read for this week was interesting to you, and as somebody who used to work in public relations, I do think that it's important to sometimes put on your public relations hat to promote a new initiative or program within an organization. And in this case, it's promoting doing user testing along the way to the completion of a project or the release of a product. Okay, so we're at the end of week 8. At the beginning of week 9, we're going to start the final project for this class, which is basically working with a group to run a usability test and to do a presentation at the end of it. There are lots more subcomponents to that assignment, which will be revealed in the actual assignment prompt, but starting in week 9 and 10, you will get joined up with your group mates and you will start embarking on that process. So I hope you've enjoyed the first half of the class. I've really enjoyed having you as students. So on that note, this is the end of your week 8 highlights video. See you in the next one.